8:43 in the morning, the 2nd of July, 1937. Somewhere over the Central Pacific, a woman presses a microphone switch. "We are on the line 157337. We are running on line." On a Coast Guard cutter below, a radio man writes it down and waits for the next one. It never comes. Not that morning, not in the 89 years since. Amelia Earhart is one of the most famous women alive, on the most dangerous leg of a flight around the world at the equator, and she disappears off a radio log mid-sentence. What follows is the largest air and sea search ever mounted to that point. 16 days, 9 ships, 66 aircraft, an area the size of Texas. Nothing at all. But that last sentence was not a goodbye, it was a bearing, a line drawn across the ocean, and one end of it points straight at an island. In 1936, a university bought her that aeroplane, $80,000, Purdue. This October, that same university is sending a ship to go and find it. 1935, Purdue University hires Amelia Earhart, not as a mascot, but as visiting faculty in aeronautical engineering and a careers advisor for its women students. In April 1936, the Purdue Research Foundation sets up a fund in her name. 3 months later, that fund buys her an aeroplane. A brand new Lockheed Electra 10E $80,000, 55 feet across the wings, registration NR16020. She calls it her flying laboratory. Inside, it is barely an airliner anymore. The passenger windows are gone, plated over. Fuel tanks run almost the whole length of the cabin, leaving so little headroom you cannot stand. At a table in the back sits Fred Noonan, merchant sailor at 13, ship's captain 20 years later, then the man who charted Pan American's clipper routes across the Pacific. He navigates by sun and stars, with a sextant and a clock. 21st of May, 1937. They leave Oakland to fly around the world the long way, along the equator. 29,000 miles. 40 days later, they have flown 22,000 of them. On the 29th of June, they land at Lae in New Guinea. About 7,000 miles left, almost all of it water. And the next leg is the one that has been waiting for them since California. Lae to Howland Island, about 2,500 miles of open Pacific. The sources still argue over the exact figure, and one target at the far end. Howland is coral, flat, treeless, barely above the water. From cruising height, it is a smudge you see when you are already on top of it. Miss it, and the next land is thousands of kilometers away. 10 in the morning, 1,100 gallons of fuel, more than 4,000 liters, the heaviest load she has ever carried. The Electra leaves the ground at 15,000 pounds, roughly twice its empty weight. The takeoff run is about 850 yards. The official report calls it satisfactory for a heavily loaded machine. Witnesses watch the Electra skim the waves as it goes. Waiting at the other end, anchored off Howland, is the Coast Guard cutter Itasca. The Electra talks to her on 2 frequencies, 3105 at night, 6210 by day, through a 50-watt transmitter. The Itasca can hear her. She cannot hear the Itasca. That never changes. Just after 6 in the morning, she asks for a bearing. Want a bearing on 3105, will whistle in mic. But the one direction finder able to fix her frequencies is not on the ship. It is on shore, on Howland. It never locks on in time. 7:42. We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low. Have been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet. By her own reckoning, she is directly overhead. The Itasca has burned searchlights all night, and at dawn burns heavy oil for a column of black smoke visible 30 miles away. She never mentions seeing it. At 8 o'clock, the call sign again. KHAQQ calling Itasca. We received your signals but are unable to get a minimum. The chief radio man, Leo Bellarts, is off shift by now. He stays at the set anyway and spends 43 more minutes trying to get a fix on an aeroplane he can hear and cannot find. 8:43, the last confirmed transmission. We are on the line 157337. We will repeat this message. We will repeat this on 6210 kilocycles. Wait, we are running online, listening on 6210 kilocycles. And then nothing. A line of position, the line Noonan calculated from the sun. Follow it one way and there is open ocean for thousands of kilometers. Follow it the other way, about 350 nautical miles, and there is an uninhabited atoll called Gardner Island. The battleship Colorado reaches the area on the 7th of July, the carrier Lexington on the 12th. 16 days after it began, the search stops, not one piece of wreckage. But while the ships are still searching, something strange is happening on the radio. Between the 2nd and the 18th of July, 120 reports of possible signals from the Electra come in from across the Pacific and from mainland America. Researchers later judged 57 credible. And here is what matters about those 57. They only work if the aeroplane is upright on dry land, with an engine started now and then to charge the radio batteries. A plane on the sea floor transmits nothing. 3rd of July, St. Petersburg, Florida. A 15-year-old girl called Betty Klenk sits by the family radio for about 3 hours, writing down a woman's voice. The voice says over and over, "This is Amelia Earhart." And then it says something a teenager in Florida could not have invented. "George, get the suitcase in my closet." George is Earhart's husband. Her father calls the Coast Guard. Nothing happens. The notebook stays in a drawer until the year 2000. On the 5th of January 1939, Amelia Earhart is declared dead in absentia. The case closes, and the following year, on the atoll at the end of Noonan's line, somebody finds a skull. 1940. Gardner Island is being surveyed by a British party looking at it for settlement. In the undergrowth, they find a human skull, then more partial bones, and the remains of what looks like a woman's shoe. The bones go to Fiji. In 1941, Dr. Hoodless measures them with the tools of his time and reaches the verdict that buries the case for most of a century: a robust, middle-aged male. The file is shelved, and at some point afterwards, the bones themselves disappear. 50 years later, the case comes back. In 1991, TIGAR, a group founded to recover historic aircraft, starts bringing objects home from that atoll. A sheet of aircraft aluminium, roughly 48 by 58 centimeters, small enough to carry under one arm. TIGAR argues it matches the plate that covered a cabin window on the Electra. The heel and sole of a 1930s woman's shoe, a jar of freckle cream sold to American women, a powder compact, on an island with nobody living on it. And in March 2018, a forensic anthropologist called Richard Jantz goes back to Hoodless's original measurements and runs them through modern software. His conclusion: those bones are more similar to Amelia Earhart than to 99% of individuals in a large reference sample. He writes that this strongly supports the conclusion that they were hers. It is the closest anyone has ever come to a body. It is also a statistical argument about a page of numbers written in 1941, because the bones that page describes no longer exist, which is why the case now rests on a shape in a lagoon. Gardner Island is called Nikumaroro now, a triangle of coral 7.5 kilometers long on a drowned volcano that rises 5 kilometers off the sea floor. Nobody lives on it. March 2015, Cyclone Pam scours sediment off the floor of that lagoon. On the 27th of April, a satellite passes overhead, and there is something down there that was never visible before. Long, metallic-looking, half buried in sediment, and the researchers say exactly the right size to be the fuselage and tail of a Lockheed Electra. They call it the Taraya object. So they start looking backwards. The same shape, they say, appears in 2 New Zealand aerial photographs from 1938 and in a TIGAR helicopter video from 2001 as a white flash of sunlight at the same spot. Since 2020, the sediment has been drifting back. Year by year, the object gets harder to see. Whatever it is going back under. And now the awkward part. The man who spent 27 years arguing that Earhart died on this atoll does not believe in this object. Rick Gillespie, who founded TIGAR, told NBC, "We have looked there is nothing there." The simplest skeptical explanation is a fallen coconut trunk. A Smithsonian curator says what is needed first is better photography. There is a reason for that caution. In January 2024, a private company announced a sonar image of something shaped like an aeroplane, 160 kilometers from Howland. In November, they went back with a robot submarine. It was a rock formation. Their chief executive called it the cruelest formation nature had ever created. The 24th of July, 2026. What would have been Amelia Earhart's 129th birthday. The Purdue Research Foundation and the Archaeological Legacy Institute announced that Kiribati has approved their expedition. 16 people, 2 of them representatives of Kiribati. The expedition is led by the archaeologist Richard Pettigrew. Pettigrew's line in the announcement, "The only way to answer this question is to go to Nikumaroro, inspect the Tarahaya object firsthand, and follow the evidence wherever it leads." On the 3rd of October, part of the team flies out of Purdue's own airport terminal, named after her. On the 7th, they sail from Tarawa, 830 nautical miles, 6 days at sea, to look at one shape in one lagoon. Be clear about what this can settle. Sonar, magnetometer, and divers can tell them whether that object is man-made metal. If it is metal from an electra, the Nikumaroro hypothesis stops being a hypothesis. What they cannot do is prove who was flying it. The 1940 bones are gone, short of a serial number tying that metal to NR16020, even a wreck leaves the last question open. And they may find nothing. That has happened before, twice, to people who were every bit as confident. 89 years ago, a navigator drew a line across an ocean, and a woman read it out loud into a microphone. One end of that line is empty water. The other end is a lagoon that a ship reaches in October. For the first time since 1937, the search has an address,